It was going so well as well. We're back again now. We're using our new setup, which just decided to not play anymore. Carrying on with Owen's very fine suggestion. We're back up and running. Joy and Pain. You couldn't wish for a better tune when your system's crashing. Broadcasting is made of these things. Maze's classic tune, Joy and Pain.
Listen.
Frankie Beverly and Maze, of course, in what has become part 2 of this morning's Good Morning Portugal radio show. I hope those who were listening and who were unceremoniously crashed out of the show with our new technology here are back with me now. A couple more tunes before we go into our talky bit, where you can join me on the phone, on the WhatsApp line if you want. 913 590 303 is the number to call if you want to call in and get involved. Can you hear that? Beautiful Portuguese soundtrack coming in through the patio windows this morning. No leaf blowers or chainsaws to be heard. So yeah, the Talkie Hour coming up. We are looking at this morning at support groups, support networks for when you're new in the country and you need a bit of help. Anything along the spectrum from despondency through to inspiration, just to push you a little bit further. That's what we're talking about, and your comments most gratefully received. I'm hoping Dawn is tuned in again, as is Owen, who've been contributing. Louisa as well. Hope she's found us again. And anyone who's new, make yourself known in the chat box. It'd be great to hear from you. Or all the other methods of getting in touch with the show, like contact the show on the. You can send me a message, an email message, if you prefer something a bit more private. When you're listening to the show on the show page of goodmorningportugal.com. So a couple more tunes. Obviously in a support group, support network, you might want to do some of this. Come on, Charles. There he is.
Express yourself. Express yourself. You don't never need help from nobody else. All you got to do now, express yourself. Whatever you do, do it good. Whatever you do, Lord, Lord. Do it good. Oh yeah. It's not what you look like when you're doing what you're doing. It's what you're doing when you're doing what you look like you're doing. Express yourself. Express yourself. You're doing it on the moon, y'all. In the jungle too. Everybody on the floor now, jumping like a kangaroo. So let the horn do the do they do, y'all. Some people have everything and other people don't. But everything don't mean a thing if it ain't the thing you want. Express yourself. Express yourself. Oh, do it. Oh, do it. Do it to it. Go on and do it. Y'all do it. Get it. Express yourself. Express yourself. Hey!
You're listening to the Good Morning Portugal radio show. That's Charles Wright and the Watts 103rd Street Band and Express Yourself, talking about support groups, support networks, and how expats get looked after and look after themselves to have the best possible experience in a new land. And I'm loving how much the birds are singing outside. Then maybe they like our soundtrack as well. I don't know if I stop talking, you'll be able to hear that. Raucous they are out there today. It's lovely. Really fantastic to be in this soundscape, broadcasting to you on the Good Morning Portugal radio show, which is crowdsourced, crowd-funded. Find out more at patreon.com/Carl Munson. One more tune, which I'm going to play for my man Lenny. And Lenny and I do a show on a Wednesday evening called the Virtual Village Radio Show. I used to live in Devon in the UK. He's still there. I'm over here, obviously, in Portugal. And we meet in the virtual village called Portugabat, where we're testing technology. And one of the things that Lenny and I are very interested in is enabling people with radio technology, and we've been working with the Access All Aerials project, which we're proud to be associated with, which has helped a whole range of people, I think getting on for 100 people certainly, and a regular core of 30, 40, 50 presenters who have taken to the airwaves despite a number of accessibility issues and disabilities and so on, additional needs, and we've just help people to set themselves free on the airwaves, and they've loved it. And they're well over 250,000 listens on their network over on Access All Aerials, and that's where I'll be tonight with Lenny, and we'll be hooking up between it could be 9, it might be 10. It's a movable and organic free-range feast when it comes to us broadcasting. But we're testing the technology so that people can link up, and I suppose that's another way, isn't it, of connecting with people, is doing your own radio show. It's never been easier to do it, and it's probably a great way of not feeling alone in the middle of nowhere. You could start your own radio show or podcast. Very happy to teach people, show people how to do that. But this is for Lenny, who I'll be broadcasting with tonight. He'll be in Newton Abbot in Devon. I'll be here on the outskirts of Lisbon in Portugal. And this is for him. He loves this tune. He loves Rico, the dearly departed Rico Rodriguez, and Warekai Vibes.
This is Rico Rodriguez, out of Warekai. You Rastafari. Grow to sound and grow to power.
So after this, the Talkie Hour. Join me for a leisurely chat.
Warekai. One more time. Very good. Warwick Isle. You Rastafari.
There you have it. Rico Rodriguez and Warwick Vibes. And you're listening to the Good Morning Portugal radio show, where we're going to breathe out and take it easy for the next talky, chatty hour, where we, as I've been saying consistently now through the first hour, and not much of a take-up, actually, or feedback on how people support themselves. So I will push on with a few ideas anyway. But let's just remind you where we are.
Hi, I'm Joel.
I am Rui
from practiceportuguese.com, and you're listening to the Good Morning Portugal podcast. Rui, you do it.
Go radio show.
And you're listening to the Good Morning.
It's not that difficult. Oh God,
Okay.
You put us on the spot now.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Relax and breathe. It's the Good Morning Portugal radio show.
And you're listening to the Good Morning Portugal radio show.
Yes! Wonderful.
Yay!
Thank you so much indeed, guys. That's wonderful. Yeah, there you go. Rui and Joel from Practice Portuguese, an incredible podcast if you want to learn the language. And what better way of getting into the culture than learning the language? Next week, I will play Ana Peite's latest language offering from the Pure Portugal podcast. I don't think they'll mind me sharing that here on the Good Morning Portugal radio show. She's done a couple of language lessons for us on the Pure Portugal podcast, and they're kind of really neat, tidy bits of vocabulary and phrasing, and it's always good, isn't it, to immerse yourself in the language, and it's such a good gateway in, as is football, I think. Now, a lot of people, when you mention the word football, and obviously with the immersion such as it is that we're experiencing at the moment with World Cup 2018 or Mundial 2018 over here in Portugal at the moment, it's a bit of a Marmite subject, isn't it? For those who do love football, it's incredible. For those, and painful obviously because of all the emotions that go with football, but for those who struggle with football, it's like, oh, when will it be over? However, Michael Heron's news, culture and sport update is quite long. It's almost a podcast in itself, so I'm going to play that at the end of the show today. But Michael makes this amazing suggestion in there that a really good way to embed yourself in the local culture is, if you haven't already, is to start taking an interest in football. Bear with me, stay with me before you start groaning and say, over my dead body, I'll never be interested in football. That might be because of your experiences that you had growing up in the UK or wherever else, or your preconditions and prejudices and judgments about football. And you'd be quite right in having a few. I mean, there are some aspects of football that are really unattractive, aren't they? Let's face it. You know, not to mention, not least the whole sort of kind of overpayment and the corporatization of football, and what a kind of greedy and nasty game it is in some ways with the money aspect. And then, you know, racism and just violence and just nastiness that you could very easily say, I don't like football and here's why. And you'd be forgiven for thinking so. However, if you come into Portugal, it's a great opportunity to pick up a new team and either pick up a new interest or rekindle your interest in football, because it is a different footballing culture over here. And you might find that by making the effort, you're going to be hanging out with people who are very passionate and interested in their team. If you join them and follow a team, you're going to be in new cultural situations, which I think are going to be very advantageous, very upbeat, and very positive. So to begin, or to continue with that sort of line of inquiry, here's a primer for you. Don't worry, you don't have to learn it all off by heart in this brief 2.5 minutes of Katia Lima's Beyond Lisbon Language Guide to the World Cup. Okay, I'll give you the links to this in the chat box and elsewhere. Or actually, just go to patreon.com/Carl Munson, where we've posted her wonderful infographic with these 10 key phrases. But here's a little bit of a primer for you now. If you're thinking about it, if I've kind of changed your mind a little bit about football, I mean, take it from me, I'm not a massive fan. I don't have a team I follow, but I do find it irresistible, and it's hard for me not to get kind of moved by the whole world event of the World Cup, and sort of the global implications and the excitement and the emotion of it all. And it's just a suggestion, but if you have this Marmite kind of reaction to football, and you're an expat in Portugal, maybe think again, because it could be your access into the culture, into a local community, into actually a lot of fun. And I think you'll find this will help.
Imagine 20 sweaty young men running back and forth in the field after a ball. Yes, it's football I'm talking about, or soccer, depending on where you are. Maybe you love football, or maybe you hate it. Maybe you're just like me. I don't care much about teams, and I think the amount of money involved in this sport is just obscene. But I do like watching a big game, and I love all the emotions of a good match. Watching a good game with people who do care about football is something I actually enjoy. The 2018 FIFA World Cup is already underway, and if you're in Portugal at the time, there's a good chance you'll be watching at least one game among Portuguese. Perhaps you're in some other part of the world where there is a Portuguese community. Fear not, you don't have to be a Ronaldo of the Portuguese language to be able to mingle with us and enjoy a game. I've put together in a handy infographic 10 useful phrases to help you enjoy the 2018 FIFA World Cup in Portugal, or with Portuguese anywhere in the world. Hello, Portuguese diaspora! Hope you have as much fun pronouncing everything as I did preparing this post. Phrase 1. É golo, it's a goal. É falta, it's a foul. It's a penalty, it's a penalty. 2. Está fora de jogo, it's offside. 3. Até minha avó marcava isso. Even my granny could score that. 4. Isso é cartão amarelo, it's a yellow card. Isso é cartão vermelho, it's a red card. 5. Quero uma cerveja, I want a beer. Quero mais uma cerveja, I want another beer. Quero termossos, I want lupin beans. Quero mais termossos, I want more lupin beans. 6. Fiteiro, drama queen. 7. Este árbitro é beep. The referee is a beep. 8. Foi dentro da área. That was inside the box. 9. Passa a bola. Beep. Pass the ball, you. Beep. Chuta a bola. Beep. Shoot the ball, you. Beep. 10. A próxima rodada pago eu. Next round is on me. So, grab a beer and a handful of termossos and enjoy the game.
Lupin beans. To my shame, I have not had lupin beans yet. Have you? What are they like? And Quero uma cerveja, that's a useful one, isn't it? So, and a lot of beeping in there, isn't there? So I think, the international language of the beep is there in the Portuguese top 10 phrases there from Katia Lima, who writes a wonderful blog called Beyond Lisbon, which is well worth checking out on WordPress. Look for Beyond Lisbon, and I'm sure if you Google Beyond Lisbon, you'll find that. And you'll also find links in our Facebook page and patreon.com/Carl Munson. Thank you so much, Katia, for that. Really brilliant. One worth downloading and listening to again, I think, especially if you're interested in football, or, as I was saying before, if you would like to reconsider having an interest in football and what power and inspiration that might give you in embedding yourself in the Portuguese community wherever you are. And that's what we're talking about in this second hour of the Good Morning Portugal show this morning with me, Carl Munson. We do have a news, culture and sport update to come where Michael Heron and I will be talking about our World Cup catch-up, but don't let that put you off, and more about his idea of how football can be a really great gateway into the culture. Also, dogs in restaurants, the law has changed on that, and nasty niffs. There was it an advertising campaign? The phrase nasty niff just comes to mind from my memory in the UK, but it has a whole new meaning here over in Portugal, where the NIF number is like your national insurance number over here, tied to your spending and taxation. And I've discovered through talking to Michael that you can also win a car once a month in the NIF mobile, you might call it, in the NIF draw. So when somebody in a supermarket says to you, if you're quite new here, and they say contribuinte, it's your contribution number, that's what they're talking about. And I've started to carry mine around on me because I haven't committed it to memory and don't really want to. But I have started giving my NIF number in shops. And we also have a conversation about ID cards. The convenience, obviously, of having an ID card, but also for the more anarchistic and sovereign among us, thumbs down for an ID card. But on the convenience side, it has to be said, you won't have to carry around 12 pieces of paper, a passport, and your driving license and I can't find the original story, and I don't know if it's one of these kind of fake news puffs on social media, but I'm sure I saw a story somewhere that talked about Portugal considering a single plastic photo ID card for expats, which has its upside and its downside, and Michael Heron and I talk more about that in the news update, which I will conclude the show with, because before then we are talking about the support groups and networks, and in our blog, the Good Morning Portugal radio show blog and podcast, which is at patreon.com/Carl Munson. We wrote a blog about the various social media groups for expats, and this is by no means an exhaustive list, but I'll just read through it because you might find out that there's one near you that you didn't know anything about. So we've done our research on it, and they have their unique personalities and some big personalities within their midst in these groups. And you know what it's like on Facebook. Things can kick off, people can fall out, and that does happen. But, you know, they're to be used wisely, aren't they, like any tool? Some are moderated, and some are moderate. Others are unmoderated and therefore prone to escalation and irritation, is what I've written in my blog here. But I think they all mean well. So here's our work in progress list. On a national level, there is, of course, my beloved Pure Portugal Living the Good Life group, which has been an amazing resource to me, and I'm proud to do the podcast for them. But I've been interested in being in Portugal for just about 10 years now, and Pure Portugal are really helpful to me. So I thoroughly recommend that one, Pure Portugal Living the Good Life, a group on Facebook. Also, these are all Facebook groups, by the way. Expats in Portugal. There is British Expats in Portugal with over 2,000 members. And that's with British Expats in lowercase I, lowercase n in Portugal for the 2,000 plus membership. There are also British Expats in Portugal, capital I, lowercase n, with over 200 people. So there are two British Expats in Portugal groups. Beware that there are two, and join the appropriate one. The lowercase in would appear to have a lot more members and traffic. There are Americans in Portugal, the expat groups, with nearly 2,000 people in, if you're an American listener, either here or in America planning your move. And there's a lot of that going on. I'm aware of lots of Americans or North Americans who are wanting to come to Portugal. So welcome to you, and thanks for tuning in, and I hope you're finding this useful. Do let me know what other lines of inquiry you would like us to pursue on the Good Morning Portugal radio show, podcast and blog, and make yourselves known. Shout out. You Americans and Canadians aren't usually shy. The Canadians obviously shyer, and I'm sure they'll appreciate me saying that. But you don't seem afraid to articulate yourselves, and so please shout out and get involved in the Good Morning Portugal Facebook page as well. Right, so on a more regional level and city level, Expats World Lisbon, 3,000 plus. The Lisbon Expat Group, 4,000 plus. Probably plush too, given what we know about Lisbon and its meteoric rise to fame, fortune and trendiness. Brit expats in Lisbon, 300 plus in there. Porto expats, nearly 3,500 people in that group. Northern Portugal expats, only 200 at the moment, but I'm sure that will increase. Expats living in Algarve, you might expect thousands here, but there are 700 or so. Algarve expats, simply Algarve expats, over 700. Expats Cascais, nearly 2,000, and they of the famed curry club over there. Expats Cascais, that's nearly 2,000 people. Expats in Ericeira, over 200 people, and expats living in Faro, Portugal, just over 100 people. So loads to go at, and I think they are a good source of support, the Facebook groups, but obviously you can get drawn into opinionated standoffs and set twos and rows, basically, and trolling and all that sort of stuff. So be careful in those groups, because at the best of times they are fantastic. You drop an inquiry in there about something you're struggling with in Portugal, and people will come to your aid. And then on other subjects, if you haven't phrased your question right, you could feel the wrath of hell descend upon you. And that's what I like about the Pure Portugal group. It's very well moderated, and people are looked after, not only by the moderators, but I think the community have got a good sense of responsibility there as well in Pure Portugal. So let me know which are the ones that work for you, which are the ones that I haven't included in my brief research there. I'll be delighted to find out from you. So that's social media online and the sort of help you can get from Facebook. Meetup is another good way, isn't it? I mean, you could go ahead and organise something on your doorstep, of course, and you could appeal to expats only, or you could make it a local community group, which would be, personally, I would favour. Sorry, just close the mic there so that I could cough. And one really good facility that I found that I've known Kenny for quite a long time now, Kenny Mamarella de Cruz, and he's known as the Men Whisperer. And he's created meetup groups for men, really, and his Men Speak initiative, which is, looking at all aspects of what it is to be a man and getting support as a bloke. But he's taken the step of making them an online resource as well. So this is Meetup, the brand Meetup, meeting Zoom, the successor to the Skype throne, and bringing his Men Speak stuff to the online environment. And I took part in an online men's group where using Zoom, you can see people and you can hear people. And you basically take your turn with the talking stick. Now, sorry for women listening, because this is a men's group, but women could pick this up and run with it as well, if it's a sort of gender-based group you're starting. But I think whatever the group is, whether it's sort of a men's group and a men's support group, or whether it is a women's support group, or whether it's for everybody, or a specialist interest group, a niche or whatever. Because interestingly, this is talking of social media groups. This was one little skirmish I had. I was in one of the expats groups talking about what sort of support groups do you favour, and somebody said, "Well, there's nothing better than football and meeting up with your mates and having a beer and a steak." And fair enough, I'm sure that can be very beneficial. But the same said person, who I have invited to come and talk to me on air, maybe he will one day, was saying, well, men's groups, you really need a psychologist there. You need trained professionals to help people. I doubt if it works. This was the kind of, I would think, the old school alpha male aspect, end of things, of the spectrum of, nothing, there's nothing that can't be sorted out over a beer and a steak. And actually, I think there are things that can't be sorted out over beer and a steak and within certain cultural contexts. And that's why I would recommend a men's speak group specifically, but others are available, where there are some ground rules. Because I think with your alpha male kind of group, it's going to be a lot of banter, isn't it? And it's going to be a bit boozy, and there's going to be certain conventions for talking man to man, which might not give rise to the more sensitive and vulnerable and authentic aspects of the men present. Bear with me. I don't know what you think about this. This might be triggering you. You might be more of a beer and steak person. You might be more of a sort of vulnerability, authenticity kind of person, or you might be both. I'm not trying to create a polar discussion here. I want it to be convergent and provide the best tools available for people. But it is, not everything can be talked about in a pub, can it? Because you might need a different kind of context or a set of ground rules. And I would like to share the ground rules with you now of the Men's Speak men's group. And they have been created. Full credit is due here to Kenny Mamarella de Cruz and all the men who've worked with him, I suppose, in coming up with these. So before you join or take part in these men's groups, they do ask you to read these ground rules, ask for clarity, and discuss anything you would wish to add, change, or challenge before the group starts. As we all take ownership of the ground rules, we meet on a level playing field and can safely explore our lives together. And that's what I'm talking about here, safe exploration of your life. maybe the boozer doesn't offer that. It might to some extent, but it might not be the best environment. So number 1, always talk about men's speak, men's groups. This is not Fight Club. Whatever you disclose will be treated in the utmost of confidence though tools, techniques and tips picked up in a group are best shared far and wide. The more self-aware, able men we support, the better our world. So invite new men along. That's rule number 1. Number 2, confidentiality. What is disclosed is in our men's group. It stays in our men's group. Phrases like "I saw this on TV" or "my friend said" are fine as long as no one can be identified. This is often referred to as the Chatham House rule, and we take this very seriously, they say. 3, respect. These are good life rules, aren't they? Respect yourself, everyone's truth, boundaries, feelings, perspectives and stories beyond judgment and projection. Respect the space when others talk and listen. Respect of other people naturally follows on from self-respect. Number 4, take part. Authentically take part in the group with words and in silence. Better to say pass for whatever reason than to resort to banter, put up a smokescreen, perform, or use any other tactics to hide from what you might be feeling, thinking, or whatever might be triggered inside. We practice authentic presence and connection. Now that's a good reason to start up a group, isn't it? And that actually is something I would like to bring to this radio show, okay? Now, that's a bit unusual, isn't it, in having a radio show, phone-in or crowd-sourced radio show where people contribute. But I would really like to foster that atmosphere and environment. So these ground rules I'm borrowing, Kenny, to use for how we relate to each other on this radio show. Number 5, be honest. Be honest with yourself and the group. That way you can own your feelings and work them through rather than quietly internalise, suppress, then dump them on someone else down the line. Yes, don't do that. We get to know our shadows, we consciously break limiting cycles, and we set ourselves free. What a relief. Another great reason to join a Men's Speak men's group. Own what you say is number 6. Use I statements rather than you, one, or we. What you say may not be true for every other man. Sorry, I'm not crying, I'm joking. Depersonalising, although I might cry, depersonalising avoids ownership of feelings, experiences, opinions and issues, making change a long, drawn-out uphill battle. We seeks validation and acceptance of other men as more important than my truth. I'm not sure I've made proper sense of how I've read that. We seeks validation and acceptance of other men as more important than my truth. Okay, interesting. Number 7, stay in the present. Be clear about what is present now in this moment and what was true of the past. Reflect this in your language. So always and keeps on might be less accurate than had and used to. Live the change you want to be and make space for your change with the power of conscious words, thoughts and intentions. Awesome! Number 8, this is a safe, inclusive space. Neither aggressive nor passive-aggressive behaviour is an option. No one's safety will be compromised. Men can learn how to better question, disagree, challenge, and learn about others with clarity, honour and respect. Be aware of when you feel vulnerable and such defences come up. Number 9, don't dramatise. Yes, everybody. A lot of this goes on, doesn't it? And fair enough too. No judging, but it might be interesting to take another look at this. When someone tells their story, let them own it from their experience without projecting how good, bad or ugly it is. Give them their space with it. Hijacking or making a meal of a man's story might tie him to it in the present, where he might want to name it, have it witnessed, learn from it, then let it go. Interesting, that one. Number 10, experiment with who you are, whether your persona is introverted, extroverted, passive, aggressive, shy or confident. You can give up any unexpressed parts of yourself a test drive here. You can give any unexpressed parts of yourself a test drive here. How excellent. Ask for feedback. Then take the most authentic you out into the world. Who a man presents to the world is not necessarily who he is. So let's explore who we really are. That's great too, isn't it? Number 11, name what's triggered. One man's story is another man's emotional reaction. So best name it, work through it and let it pass. Carrying it home and allowing it to get a hold feeds it well and keeps it in the present, denying exploring its message to you and your freedom to live beyond it. We name it. We don't shame it or blame it. Very good. Number 12, and this is the final rule, a boyish rebellion. Number 12 is live beyond the rules. Boyish rebellion might be less efficient than manly exploration. Yes, playing small to be liked in the group may be less valuable than playing big, possibly being challenged and growing with the experience. Explore your survival rules, restrictions, and our boundaries to claim your authentic perspective and position in your life. Pretty amazing stuff, isn't it? This is not a therapy group, they hasten to add, nor an encounter group, not a word that I can't read out group, or a place to pick up men for sex, not a group for or against men or women, not a religious or spiritual group, not a political group, not a group of anything apart from whatever the men present make it. Such boundaries are designed to keep our circle clean and free of expectation and ulterior motives. Just about got to the end of that sentence. And a quote here to conclude, Mike Portelli says, feel your feelings, trust the process, stay until the end. All activities are undertaken, this is a bit I should read fast as the T's and C's. All activities are undertaken entirely at the participant's own risk. No responsibility will be taken and no compensation discussed for loss or injury. By taking part, each participant accepts full responsibility for his own safety and well-being. If in doubt, please seek professional advice before participating. May the force be with you. Find out more at kennydecruz.com. All the W's. Kenny, Kenny, letter D, Cruz, CRUZ.com. KennyDCruz.com, basically. Yes, and he's known as the Man Whisperer. So I think that's fantastic, and some really good ground rules for any kind of group. I hope you'll agree there. And maybe something you would dare to do. I extend that urge to my brothers, all the men out there, the Men Speak online men's group. I really enjoyed the first one, and I would be very glad to take part in any subsequent groups and even host a kind of Portuguese flavoured, Portugal-based group. So get in touch with me if you would like to do that. That's been quite sort of partisan and personal, but I make no apology for that. This is the Good Morning Portugal radio show. I will lead it, and others are very welcome to come in and influence it. But until they do, I will own my opinions and share them with you on this radio show and hope they're of interest. But the invitation is there. Make this show your own. Get involved, and let's make it a real resource to anyone endeavouring to settle in and live in Portugal and have the best possible experience here. I think we conclude now with Michael Heron's news and culture update, and sport, of course, the conversation that I have with Michael. This is recorded last night in the rather lively ambiance of Casa Munson, whereby there are children, dogs, the clattering of plates, and household noises. So it's actually I've managed to create a Portuguese soundscape, I would like to think. Thanks for listening so far. We'll conclude with this today, and please stay in touch via the Facebook page, Good Morning Portugal. Do tune in again next week. Please help me in the meantime. Choose a theme for the show. Be glad to hear from you. So we'll finish with news, culture and sport with Michael Heron. Take care. Thanks for listening so far. Right, it's that time in the Good Morning Portugal radio show to talk to Michael Heron, our news, culture and sport man. Michael, you there?
Hello, Mr. Munson. I am here. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And you?
Yeah, I'm very well, yeah.
We are enjoying the World Cup Mundial 2018. You probably know how to say that in Portuguese, don't you? The 2018 bit.
Yeah, I do, but I'm not gonna try and say it now live because I'll probably mess it up.
Okay, I'm sorry, too much pressure. That was unkind of me to do that, but we're well and truly into it, aren't we? And it looks like Portugal and England are safely through. For those who don't like football, look away now. It's like when the score comes on and you don't want to hear the score. If you don't like football, it might be a good chance to go and put the kettle on, and we'll probably just do a couple of 3 minutes or so of catching up on where England and Portugal have got to so far. It's been pretty nail-biting, let's face it, right?
It has been, and I think, we were talking about this on Sunday, weren't we? When you very kindly invited us over to your place to watch England Panama, and we were saying, weren't we, how open this World Cup is, and I think it's the most open World Cup that I can remember. In that, going into the tournament, you had a lot of countries that were touted as being favourites, such as Brazil, Germany, Argentina, France. And with the exception of maybe Brazil, there's not really any country that has shown that they are clear favourites, and that's been really fascinating to see. But there's obviously been some standout performances. One of them clearly Cristiano Ronaldo in the first game against Spain, getting that hat trick. And then in the last game, there was obviously quite a lot of of controversy, shall we say, where he was sort of the hero and the villain at the same time. Scored a goal, missed a penalty, and then nearly got sent off.
Yeah.
And maybe should have got sent off. It was very strange, and I remember there was a VAR moment where the referee went to sort of take a second look on the screen, and you could see when the camera did a close-up to Cristiano, when they were sort of waiting to see if he was going to be sent off, you could see in his face that he was worried, he was concerned. And then when he was given a yellow, he was sort of laughing it off, as if to say, well, that was a ridiculous decision. But it was fascinating. And then obviously England surprised us all with that magnificent win on Sunday, and we'll have to see how they perform on Thursday against Belgium. But it's been a great tournament, and I think for me anyway, as a romantic, one of the highlights on Sunday was seeing Panama score their solitary goal and their oldest player, who I think is 37, right, getting that goal, and that was a great moment. It shows how much it means to fans when they see their team pull off these moments in tournaments. And,
yes.
It's important to remember that.
There's a skew on it, isn't there? Because when England drew, it was as though they'd won. And when Panama only got one goal to England's 6, it was as though they drew. You know, it's just a kind of relative scale of things, isn't it? And that 37-year-old retiree, if it's the same as the English pub culture, and he opens a pub back in Panama City or whatever, he can proudly display his jersey from this retiring match, can't he, where he scored that one goal against England, and just lunch out on it forever.
Absolutely. I mean,
quite right too.
And these successes are all relative, aren't they? And you have to put it into context. And obviously for Panama to get a goal against England, and for their fans that have travelled all the way to Russia with zero expectation to see them score, and the way they celebrated. I don't think I've ever seen a team celebrate that, fans of a team celebrate that much, scoring a goal to make the score 6-1 from 6-0.
Yes.
I thought that was a wonderful moment, and kind of reminding us all that this is one of the great things about the World Cup, and that football is an international passion that we can all share, regardless of our sort of cultural background or language.
And it's becoming that, isn't it?
All of that.
It is. As you said, all bets are off almost. There have been some very uncertain starts, and it's been hard to call. But that's what a World Cup should be in a way, and I'm glad to see it. And no one begrudged Panama that last goal. I think it was a really good result for them. So England are through, Portugal are through. Oh yeah, just a bit more on that VAR stuff, and it's brought an absolutely brilliant new dimension to the World Cup game, isn't it? Is that you did have that fantastic close up of Ronaldo's face, and the drama of the referee walking off to go and look at all on his own. It's like there are tens of thousands of people in the stadium, and there he is. It's all on him as he watches replay footage in front of this little screen just off stage, and it's added a whole new dimension of drama, I think, to the World Cup.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when I was watching Benfica play this season this last season in the Portuguese league, they were using VAR.
Oh, really? Right.
In Portugal, yes, and the one criticism I have of it, well, it's two things really. One is when you're a fan in the stadium, and this has happened to me when I was watching Benfica, you didn't really know what was going on, and the communication wasn't very good. So there was always this delay where you didn't know for sure what was happening, and you had an idea that the referee was consulting with VAR, but it wasn't very clear. Now, obviously, if you're a fan watching it at home, it's different because you're watching it on TV and the commentator's updating you, and the cameras are focusing on what's happening. But as a fan in the stadium, it's a big problem, and I think they need to fix that.
Well, which way is it going to go? Is it going to be like America when that happens? Is there going to be like an entertainment break, or is something else going to bust out along the hospitality lines just to make that a little bit more bearable?
Well, yeah. I mean, this is the other interesting thing, and this is the other criticism I have of it. And I remember John Motson famously saying when it was first muted a few years ago that this technology would be brought in, and he's now retired, and he's obviously commentated for nearly 50 years, I think, and he was saying that he was worried about where does it stop. So if you bring this technology in, what are you going to use it for? Because the original idea was to check to see if a goal had happened, so the ball had crossed the line or not.
Yeah.
And now it seems like it's being used for almost any possible decision, whether someone should be sent off, whether there should be a penalty. So I think there needs to be a bit more clarity and transparency, and there seems to be a lot of confusion. But what's really interesting in this World Cup is the amount of penalties that there have been. There's been a lot more penalties than there would usually have been because of VAR, and a lot more goals, and probably the Golden Boot winner will have a higher goal tally than is normal. I mean, take Harry Kane, for example. He scored 5 goals in 2 games, 3 of which were penalties. So, I think these things have positive and negative things. And you're right, they could introduce a US system where they, take the opportunity to do sort of commercials.
Bring on the dancers.
Yeah, I hope not. I really hope not.
Okay.
I'm quite old-fashioned when it comes to this. Yeah. And so far, it seems like nearly all of the decisions have been correct, which is good. So it seems to have taken away some of that controversy where maybe certain countries felt hard done by. And England will never have an excuse that we, lost a match in the World Cup through being unlucky, because
we'll have to find other excuses.
We'll have to find another excuse, yeah.
So we've probably talked enough about football as far as non-football fans are concerned. They've put the kettle on and come back. They've probably even drunk their cup of tea by now.
Yeah, well, I was going to say one other thing about it, if I may.
Of course.
And this kind of relates to, I think, being an expat in Portugal, and that is because football is a passion that is shared globally. When you're an expat coming to Portugal, if you show your passion, and it doesn't have to be football, it can be anything, but I'll use football as an example because this is something that I did. I found it a great way to break down barriers when meeting and forming friendships with Portuguese people, be it colleagues or neighbours or whatever, and choosing a team and deciding to follow them and go to the matches. I found that a great way to feel closer to the culture and feel more part of the community. So whether it's religion or football or another passion, I think it's really important that expats do find a way to engage with the local community, and football is a great way of doing that.
You make an excellent point there. That's really, really good advice, because just because you don't like football back home, and there might be very good reasons for that, it's a different culture here, for example, isn't it? And you might find that getting into football here would be like a new lease of life or a brand new take on the subject, and you'll be involved in something really exciting. We've got a friend staying with us at the moment, and as soon as she arrived in Faro, she was taken out by her Airbnb host to watch the game and had a great time.
There you go. That's it. I became a season ticket holder at Benfica after my first year of living here. So I've been going to the matches regularly for 3 years now, and I chose Benfica, well, mainly because I'm a Norwich fan. And I didn't want to subject myself to any more misery by supporting a mediocre team in Portugal. So I decided to choose Benfica. But I think it is a really great way of feeling more, part of the community, and I definitely feel more Portuguese having a Portuguese team that I follow, and it coming up in conversation all the time. Being it with a taxi driver or in a restaurant or with Portuguese people. So I think
good advice.
It was something that helped me. It isn't. You don't have to, do that to feel at home. But right. I think finding a passion that you can share with other Portuguese people and expats even will make you feel at home quicker, I think.
Very good. That's a really good point you make, and even joining a church community, because I said that to my wife. I said, if we're going to get involved in a community, we might even start going to church. And she looked at me like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So and just because you haven't done something like that in the past, you are in a new country, and it may be a very different experience. And I think it's really important to maybe bite the bullet and do something you think you maybe don't like, but you might be blessed twice or thrice over for your commitment and having a little go at something where you wouldn't ordinarily go back home.
Absolutely. And, I think, that's a really good example. And even if you're not someone that necessarily was someone that was a practicing Catholic or Protestant or whatever your religion is or whatever your background might be, it's definitely, it's a way to engage with the local community. And, that there's a very strong culture around the different religions that are practiced in Portugal.
Great idea. Very good point. Very good point indeed. People have probably heard it's a busy newsroom tonight, this virtual newsroom of ours. We've got guests and you might be hearing them chattering, and children. It's a very Portuguese atmosphere, actually. It's quite late at night. We're recording this on the Tuesday evening, and it's a real... We've managed to nail the Portuguese atmosphere, like people chatting and children and a dog barking, which leads us on to your next story of interest. Yeah, that's the dog next door, who... according to what's come onto your radar this week, might be going out for dinner with its owner. Is that right?
Yeah, well, there was a law passed on Monday which basically will allow restaurant owners they'll be legally allowed to allow
entertain
people to entertain four-legged customers in their restaurants.
Yes.
I wasn't aware that this was even something that wasn't legal previously, but it in a way explains why I'd heard a lot of negativity from some of the dog owners that I'd met in Portugal, that they were having difficulty in taking their dogs to restaurants. In fact, I remember we had some friends from Spain who came with their dog, and they found it very difficult. And there are only one or two restaurants that allowed them to take their dog in. So maybe that explains why, if you have a dog and you've been living in Portugal, or you've brought your dog over on holiday, that might explain why you've been having problems. And it doesn't mean that all of a sudden overnight every restaurant is going to allow your dog in. It just means that legally they will be able to, and maybe some restaurants will start to be more flexible with that.
There might be specialist restaurants where they really welcome dogs in. And it's a complete about turn, isn't it? Because it's not as if it's like guide dogs are an exception. This has gone from dogs being illegal in restaurants to being totally legal now. So, and we are having a cultural shift here, because I think there is this sort of idea about, the sort of Portuguese dog culture is very much like a rural thing with a dog chained to the proverbial engine block that barks at you when you walk past the residence, or you can tell who's coming down the street by the procession of dog barking, and even I think it's not uncommon to be chased or barked at by a dog in the street. It's a very different culture to the UK and then sort of namby-pamby dog owning that we might be used to. So this is quite a shift, isn't it? And I think it might come into line with other European countries. I remember being in France, and people quite like to go out in France, don't they, with a toy dog on their lap, like a really sort of beefy butch bloke will be out with his missus, but will have like a little poodle that he's petting on his lap, and then maybe there's a Portuguese wish to do that as well.
Well, it's interesting you said that, because I used to live in Belgium, and I think Belgium has one of the highest ratios of sort of people to dogs. I think it was sort of 1 in 9 Belgians owned a dog, and you would find dogs everywhere, and you'd sort of be eating in a restaurant, there'd be a dog under the table next to you. It's I had the dog again. What's really interesting though is that if you go to the beach, or any beach, or the beaches certainly that I've been to in around Lisbon and in the south of Portugal, is that you do see a lot of dogs at the beach, and it doesn't seem like it's something that's illegal. Whereas in other countries I've been to, they're very strict about it. So that's the one positive thing if you're a dog owner, or if you're thinking about moving to Portugal with your pet, that if you do live close to the beach, or you're planning to go to the beach, that most beaches will allow you to take your dog with you to the beach.
And now restaurants. So, yeah, a real change.
Yeah.
A real change in dog owning culture. And I think, yes, I've noticed that on the beaches as well. There's more of a sort of promenading with your dog culture. That's, it's very difficult to avoid the term dogging, isn't it, in a conversation like this. We don't need to say anything about that at all. And it's not an area I've researched since being in Portugal. You might be glad to hear. I'm not judging. I'm not judging. It's not a pastime I'm especially interested in. Although we could make a full circle back to football, because notable footballers have had it as a hobby.
Yeah,
but let's not go there.
We shouldn't go there. No, let's not.
Fair enough. Okay, let's get serious now then and talk about ID cards. And for the life of me, I can't find. It might be one of those fake news Facebook things, because I saw in a feed recently that there was an ease of application for a new ID card that was going to replace loads of various bits of paper that you had to take. So for some appearances to register or whatever, you might take into double figures sheets of paperwork, your driving license, your passport, your registration document, your health forms and stuff. And it's all going to be, allegedly, I thought I saw somewhere, with one card that's going to be issued by the Portuguese authorities. Have you seen this?
Is this ID cards for expats? For expats.
Yeah.
Okay.
To make it easier.
That would make sense. And I remember one of my friends who's also from the UK, who's been living in Portugal for a number of years. He said that there used to be photographic ID cards, and then they stopped issuing them. So the challenge at the moment is, if you move to Portugal as an EU national, so if you're coming from the UK or another country in the EU, then you're not given a photographic ID. You're given a European residency certificate.
Yes.
And so unless you have a passport or a driver's license, and again, you don't even get given a Portuguese driver's license when you register your UK or other EU countries' driver's license here. You're simply given a little sort of receipt saying that you've registered it with the Portuguese equivalent of the DVLA. So if they were to introduce something, it sounds like they have, then I think that's a positive thing, because it will save a lot of faffing about and having to take, as you said, all of these documents when you go to have to perform any kind of administration.
Civic duty, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I would be very happy if that were the case and it were introduced, because it would make my life a lot easier. Because at the moment, the only form of photographic ID that I have is my UK driver's license or my passport, and obviously you don't want to take your passport when you're out and about. So
I see. Okay, and this, I suppose, yes, to the more anarchistic in our community who might be listening, who eschew such things.
It's a good thing not to have it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Protected.
It's like ID cards. I mean, and it's hard to escape ID cards. Everyone has to have a passport coming in and out, don't they? Unless they are really serious about coming in by boat or some crazy stuff like that, as a sovereign being who refuses to be documented and registered. And it's always the same argument, isn't it? It's like, this is an infringement and too much record keeping on the individual and a challenge to one's sovereignty. But on the other hand, it's a massive boon in convenience. And it always seems to be the same debate. I remember this, just from being a kid and listening to, the Radio 2 phone-ins. The whole idea of ID cards in the UK, they try and introduce it, don't they, every decade probably, meet with the same bitterness and anger. I don't know, Brexit might change that. I'm not sure how it's going to be there. But certainly as an expat wandering about in Portugal, there's definitely an upside on the convenience aspect of having one plastic photo ID rather than all the other precious things you might prefer to leave at home.
Yes, there is, because, for example, this has happened to me a few times, especially when I've gone for meetings, business meetings, where, in some cases you're going to a sort of a large privately owned building, and the security guard, in reception will ask to see ID. And, you sort of show them a driver's license, and then they'll automatically assume that you're a foreigner, and they won't realise that you're someone that's residing in Portugal. So there isn't that distinction. But as you said, at the same time, it's actually quite nice to have that reassurance that maybe you're in control of of something that you wouldn't be if these things were issued. But I think at the end of the day, it's how it's managed and how they're implemented. I mean, there are positives to it. So I remember in Spain, for example, up until recently, before chip and PIN was introduced, any transaction that you made with a credit card where you had to sign for it,
yes,
the proprietor would ask for your ID card. So that massively reduced the credit card fraud, because you would have to show, you'd have to present ID. So as a security element, that was reassuring, I think, for Spanish people. So there's good and bad sides to these things, and we can be a bit paranoid and think that there's sort of a higher control element to it, which maybe there is, but I think
for another time, isn't it? Another debate.
Maybe for another debate on or off air.
Some will be saying roll on Bitcoin and the blockchain to protect one's anonymity of spending, but we shall see. And that of course leads us on to the nasty NIF, you might say, which we haven't covered yet. But I mean, if anyone was ever worried about free liberty and freedom of movement and not being tracked by the government, if you give your NIF number consistently, which is the number that you're asked to give, almost like a national insurance number, every one of your purchases would be traceable. I mean, it knocks the Tesco card, for example, or store card, loyalty cards, into a cocked hat, doesn't it? Because it's every one of your transactions, date stamped, and the amounts and everything, as you go about your business in Portugal with the NIF system.
Yes, but again, I think there are positives and negatives to that. So, for example, if you go online to your own sort of account, you can actually see all of your purchases if you've given your personal tax number, your NIF number. So in a way, it's a really good way of being able to manage your finances better, because you can see what you're spending your money on. Now, obviously, that's the complete opposite of what you're saying, which is, the sort of more cynical, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that view that, it means that there's more control over what you're doing.
Yes.
But something that people, especially expats, may not realize is that there are certain incentives to giving your NIF number when you make a purchase. There's actually a draw made every month, and a brand new car is given away.
I didn't
to
know
one
that.
random NIF number.
The
every
NIF
month.
mobile.
Yeah.
The NIF mobile gets awarded.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So, and when you do your tax return at the end of the year, there are certain things that you can deduct, because as you know, everyone has to do a personal tax return, whether you're freelance or an employee or whatever. So there are definitely advantages to it. But yeah, obviously it can be a bit of a culture shock when you come to Portugal, especially from the UK, where we're not used to this. And
yes.
Every purchase you made, you're asked if you want a receipt with your
contribuent
number on
contribuent.
it.
They are saying.
Exactly.
And that'll be a few bombshells there for people who've been here for a while and know nothing about that. So sorry if we've surprised you with it.
The advice I'd give to anybody moving to Portugal to live here is the first thing you need is your NIF number, and without it, it's like you don't exist. So you have to have it to do everything. You need a NIF number. It's absolutely essential, and it's very easy to do it. It takes about 5 minutes. You go to your local tax office, you present your passport, and they give you a NIF number.
And I think everyone has their own NIF story, don't they? I think I got mine in Alcobaça, and it's a special day when you do that. It's a kind of milestone event. Wherever you are in the country and wherever you decide to do it, is a milestone event, and it gives you a beautiful taste of Portuguese bureaucratic culture as well. Yes. And I mean that in a neutral way. I don't mean that in a judgmental way. But you do deal with the bureaucracy and the officialdom in a special way, and I get a stamp.
Yeah, it's true, and it can be frustrating. But what I would also say to that is that other countries I've been to, it's much worse. So I found it worse in Spain. I found the bureaucracy a lot worse. And also, I think stories I've heard from foreigner friends of mine that have moved to the UK, they found getting a national insurance number a nightmare as well.
Yes.
So,
I'm sure. That's bureaucracies the world over. And the upside, of course, is if you go on a bender in Lisbon, as people are increasingly doing, and you give your NIF number, you can track between the hours of about 10 o'clock on Friday night or Saturday night and the early hours of the next morning exactly how much you spent on the equivalent of kebabs and dodgy nightclubs and whatever.
See, every cloud has a silver lining, right? and I'm not going to lie to people. There are very frustrating parts of the administrative process here. So it's not all an easy walk in the park by any means.
And these are the subjects that we will be delving into, and we would love your lead on those. So do let us know. This has been News, Culture and Sport on the Good Morning Portugal radio show with Michael Heron. Thank you so much, Michael.
My pleasure. And we should probably also mention that we have a Twitter feed as well.
Oh, yes.
Which is called Expat News Portugal, at My Portugal News. So yes. Please follow us on Twitter and use that as an opportunity to communicate more often with us and suggest what you would like us to talk about, because I think we're both very open to talking about anything that could be of interest to both of our listeners.
Yeah, I see what you did there. At My Portugal News on Twitter. That's a new thing. Thank you for reminding me. A bientôt, or the Portuguese equivalent, which is até breve, my friend.
Yeah, or déjà, or até logo.
Até logo.
You're listening to the Good Morning Portugal radio show with Carl Munson. Find out more about this crowd-funded community radio show, podcast and blog at goodmorningportugal.com.
I need $1.